For 25 years, in 19th-century Pennsylvania, one man married 5 women. Each bride entered his grand Beacon Hill mansion in perfect health, full of youth, charm, and promise. And each one left it broken within mere months of living in the master bedroom suite. Every wife suffered the same terrifying fate: complete mental collapse. When the truth emerged in 1835, it didn't just rock Millbrook County, it shocked the entire state. This wasn't bad luck. It wasn't a family curse, it was deliberate. A methodical campaign designed to shatter women's minds. Tonight, we peel back the velvet curtains of Jeremiah Hartwell's mansion and expose how one man drove 5 wives to madness using techniques so coldly calculated, they remain chilling, even today. Before we begin, subscribe to our channel and tell us in the comments what state you're listening from. These events might have happened closer to your home than you think. The scandal that would stain Pennsylvania's history began in the thriving town of Millbrook, nestled in the coal-rich valleys southwest of Pittsburgh. By 1820, the Industrial Revolution had transformed a quiet farming village into a booming hub of smoke-churning factories and proud new mansions rising above the Monongah River. Jeremiah Hartwell arrived in Millbrook in 1821, a 25-year-old with ambition in his veins and steel in his eyes. Unlike many industrialists of his time, he hadn't inherited a fortune. The son of a blacksmith from rural Ohio, Hartwell had clawed his way up with a sharp mind and ruthless determination. Within 5 years, he founded Hartwell Iron Works, producing railroad components vital to America's westward expansion. By 1828, his empire had bought him a palace, a 3-story Georgian mansion on Beacon Hill. It had 42 rooms, imported marble, manicured gardens, and most famous of all, a master bedroom suite that spanned the entire east wing, hand-painted French wallpaper, a towering Pennsylvania cherrywood bed, and windows that commanded sweeping views of the valley. And Hartwell himself was every inch the figure of wealth and power, standing over 6 feet, with piercing blue eyes and striking silver hair. He could charm business rivals into friendship and strangers into devotion. Society's most prominent families invited him to every gathering, their daughters drawn to his sophistication and his fortune. When he became engaged to Margaret Dunlap, the 19-year-old daughter of a respected judge, the town celebrated. Their October 1829 wedding was the social event of the decade, 300 guests filling St. Andrew's Presbyterian Church. Margaret's decline began subtly. By spring, her wit and lively conversation were giving way to distracted silences. Guests noticed her staring out windows, as though she was listening for something. Her sister, Catherine Dunlap, later wrote, "She spoke of the house as though it were alive, as if it called her name from the empty doorways." By summer, the change was undeniable. Margaret refused to sleep anywhere but the master bedroom, claiming she didn't belong in other rooms. Servants began whispering about her watching habit, how she would stand at the bedroom windows for hours, not looking at the gardens, but at her own reflection, tilting her head as though studying herself from different angles. Then came the night of August 1830. The Hartwells were hosting a dinner party for Pittsburgh's elite, when Margaret rose from her chair mid-meal, crossed the room to a large mirror, and began an animated conversation with her reflection. Guests fell silent as she gestured, laughed, and seemed to argue with the image in the glass, pausing as if it were speaking back. When Hartwell tried to gently lead her away, she resisted, insisting she wasn't finished talking yet. Hours later, the head housekeeper, Sarah Quinn, found her at 3 a.m., naked, tearing the French wallpaper from the master bedroom walls strip by strip. When asked why, she smiled serenely and said, "I need to see what's underneath." The exposed walls were ordinary plaster, but Margaret's satisfaction was as if she had uncovered a hidden truth. Dr. Harrison Henley, the family physician, examined her the next morning. His notes later used as evidence described an unusual fixation with mirrors and reflective surfaces, and a certainty that these reflections speak to her about the house and its history. Within 2 weeks, she required constant supervision. She claimed every mirror in the mansion held messages only she could interpret, speaking often to her other Margarets. When the family tried covering the mirrors, she clawed the cloth away until her fingernails bled. The final incident came on September 15, 1830. Somehow, Margaret gathered every mirror, every polished silver tray, every reflective surface in the house into the master bedroom. She arranged them in a complex pattern, then spent the night in what the housekeeper described as a conference with her other selves. By morning, Margaret no longer recognized her husband or anyone else. She spoke only to the reflections, and to her, those reflections were her real family. After consulting with colleagues in Philadelphia, Dr. Henley made a grim recommendation: Margaret should be committed to the Pennsylvania Hospital for the Insane. On a gray October morning, autumn leaves swirling around the Hartwell mansion, Margaret was led to a closed carriage. She looked back over her shoulder and called out, "I'll be back soon." She never returned. Margaret would spend the next 43 years locked away, still searching for mirrors in her small, restricted room, never regaining her sanity. Her removal sent shockwaves through Millbrook's social elite, but the town's reaction revealed the era's complicated view of mental illness. Some whispered of hereditary madness, others hinted at moral weakness, but most saw Jeremiah as the tragic victim of forces beyond his control. In the 1830s, female madness was often explained away as the result of overstimulation, excessive reading, or straying from traditional feminine roles. Dr. Henley's official report to the county stated that Margaret's breakdown likely stemmed from the sudden rise in her social position and the pressures of domestic responsibility. That explanation comforted the public. It fit neatly into the accepted belief in the delicate female constitution. For the next 3 years, Hartwell lived as a reclusive widower. He sealed the master bedroom, draping its furniture in white sheets, and moved to a small room on the 3rd floor. The staff, now reduced to a skeleton crew, noted how he spent long evenings alone in his study, buried in medical books and letters from physicians. He became obsessed with what he called the science of mental affliction, amassing a vast library on phrenology, European theories of nervous disorders, and every available treatise on the mind's collapse. His personal journals, uncovered decades later, paint the picture of a man haunted, desperate for a rational explanation for his wife's madness. In 1833, news came from the asylum. Margaret was dead. Years of physical decline had mirrored her mental deterioration. Her funeral was a quiet affair for family only. Her gravestone read simply, "Beloved wife, at peace." Those close to Hartwell noticed subtle but troubling changes in him after her death. His attention to detail became almost obsessive. He demanded every mirror in his office be polished twice daily. In meetings, he would check his reflection repeatedly. If reassuring himself he appeared normal. He also began speaking of marriage again, but with unsettling detachment. Rather than romance, he spoke in terms of compatibility assessments for potential brides, analyzing them like business deals. It was during this period that he met Elena Rodriguez, the 22-year-old daughter of a Spanish merchant tied to Pittsburgh's growing trade. Elena's beauty was matched by her quick intelligence and, most importantly to Hartwell, what he described as remarkable mental resilience. Their engagement in spring 1834 surprised Millbrook society. Many assumed Hartwell would never remarry. Yet, in Elena's company, he seemed to regain his charm and social ease. The June wedding was elegant, but modest compared to his first. And then, Hartwell made a curious decision. He reopened the master bedroom. He had it redecorated with fresh wallpaper, new furnishings, and an entirely new set of mirrors. Elena took great pride in the suite, often showing visiting ladies the light-filled room and its beautiful, reflective surfaces. Her favorite was the large vanity mirror, where she would sit for long stretches, brushing her dark hair and chatting cheerfully with her maid. For 6 months, she thrived, gracious, confident, and an admired hostess. Unlike the reserved Margaret, Elena was vibrant and socially at ease. But in the winter of 1834, subtle changes crept in. By February 1835, her personal maid, Maria Santos, who had served her since girlhood, began keeping a secret diary. In it, she recorded the first signs. Signora Elena spends hours at the vanity, but she does not look at herself. She stares just to the left of her reflection, as if watching someone else. When I asked, she said, "She is telling me something important, Maria. I must listen." By March, Elena's mirror conversations had begun. She positioned herself before mirrors in different rooms, pausing as though listening, then replying to unheard voices. Unlike Margaret's agitated exchanges, Elena seemed calm, almost friendly. "She tells me about the house, about the family who lived here before, about secrets in the walls," Elena confided to Maria. "She even advises me on managing the staff. Her advice is excellent." Dr. Henley was discreetly consulted again. His private notes mention a troubling parallel to the previous Mrs. Hartwell's condition. But also differences. Elena remained coherent, rational, and socially functional, except in her relationship with mirrors. Then, in April 1835, the turning point came. Elena told the household she had learned something vital from what she now called the mirror woman. The previous Mrs. Hartwell, she said, was still in the house, trapped in the mirrors, trying to warn the next wives about the truth hidden in the walls. Elena had become utterly convinced that the mirrors held a spirit. Dr. Henley wrote to a colleague in Philadelphia, "Unlike cases of religious mania or supernatural delusion I have seen, Mrs. Hartwell remains perfectly rational in every other matter. She manages the household with efficiency, maintains her social relationships, and shows none of the physical deterioration that typically marks mental illness. Her fixation is entirely centered on reflective surfaces and on what she believes they reveal about the house's past." Jeremiah's response to Elena's emerging condition was markedly different from his reaction to Margaret's. This time, there was no immediate rush to doctors or institutions. Instead, he began what he called careful observation and documentation. His journals reveal a man convinced there was a pattern forming within his own home. Elena's decline mirrors Margaret's. Both healthy before living in the master bedroom, both developing mirror fixations within months, both claiming their reflections imparted knowledge they could not have otherwise known. Yet the variations suggest the cause may be environmental, not constitutional. Hartwell began running what he described as controlled experiments. He tracked which mirrors provoked the strongest reactions, the times of day when Elena's conversations were most vivid, and the kind of information she claimed to receive. The results were unsettling. Her most intense episodes occurred in the master bedroom between sunset and midnight, always with the same large vanity mirror that had captivated Margaret. Elena's dialogues followed an eerie consistency. She would ask questions about the house's history, and then, pausing as though listening, relay detailed accounts of previous residents, hidden rooms, and secrets that must be preserved. By May 1835, Elena told her maid, Maria, "The mirror woman says Margaret was never insane. She says Margaret discovered something so terrible about this house, or its owner, that she was made to appear mad, to silence her." According to Elena, Margaret was still present in the mirrors, warning future wives of the truth. By summer, the changes in Elena were impossible to conceal from Millbrook's society. She refused invitations to homes without mirrors, claiming she needed to consult her advisor before speaking with certain people. At mirrorless gatherings, she became distracted and agitated, often leaving early to return to her suite. The breaking point came in August 1835. Jeremiah found her one stifling evening seated before the vanity, hands folded, perfectly still, her face etched with sorrow. She didn't turn to him as she spoke. She has shown me the truth about this house, about what you do to the women who live in this room, about why Margaret really went insane. According to Jeremiah's own journal, Elena's allegations were explosive. She claimed the mere woman had shown her hidden passages, secret rooms where people had been kept against their will, and evidence of medical experiments performed on unwilling subjects. "The medicine you give me for my headaches," she accused. "It's not medicine at all. It makes women see things that aren't there, so the world will believe they're insane." The very next morning, Jeremiah went to Dr. Henley, describing Elena's paranoid delusions and conspiracy fantasies. Henley, disturbed by the parallels to Margaret's case, agreed she was on a dangerous trajectory. Her insistence on hidden passages and secret activities suggests a complete break from reality. Without immediate intervention, I fear she may become violent. But Elena wasn't about to be quietly removed. Over the following days, she began her own investigation. She and Maria scoured the house for the secret passages her reflection had described. Then dash-proof, behind a wardrobe in the master bedroom, Maria tapped on a wall and heard it echo hollow. A concealed panel swung inward to reveal a cramped passage between the walls, just wide enough for a person to squeeze through. It connected several second-floor rooms and contained tiny viewing holes, positioned to look directly into the bedrooms. "The mere woman was right," Elena whispered. "If this is true, then everything else is true as well." The discovery rattled the staff and, deeply unsettled, Jeremiah. His journal from that period admitted, "Elena's delusions have led to the discovery of architectural features I did not know existed. The previous owner never mentioned them. I can only assume they were constructed for purposes I cannot guess. But Elena's interpretation has detached entirely from reason. She sees the entire design as evidence of a conspiracy against wives in general, and hers in particular, as word of Elena's discoveries spread through Millbrook's gossip circles." Questions began to close in on Jeremiah Hartwell, questions he couldn't easily answer. Why didn't he know about the hidden passages? What had been their true purpose? And how could he possibly explain the disturbing coincidence that both of his wives developed nearly identical obsessions, tied to the same bedroom and the same mirrors? The pressure escalated when Elena's father, Don Carlos Rodriguez, arrived, unannounced from Pittsburgh, a shrewd merchant who'd built his fortune on skepticism and sharp instincts. Don Carlos wasn't the type to accept comfortable lies. His meeting with Elena revealed a woman who was perfectly composed, except for her unwavering insistence on the mere woman's warnings. His private conversation with Jeremiah that evening was blunt. "My daughter claims she has discovered criminal activity in this household," Don Carlos said evenly. "She alleges that her mind is being manipulated with medications she has not consented to. These accusations cannot be dismissed simply because the person making them is under suspicion of madness." The confrontation unfolded in the mansion's libraria, deliberate choice by Jeremiah, as the room contained no mirrors. But Elena insisted on bringing one. "I cannot discuss important matters without her guidance," she said. "She knows this house. She tried to protect Margaret, and now she's trying to protect me." Unlike others, Don Carlos didn't dismiss the claim. He pressed her for specifics. "Tell me exactly what the mirror woman has revealed." What followed was unsettling. Elena described the mansion's original owner in detail, architectural elements that predated Jeremiah's ownership, and most disturbing of all, accurate information about financial dealings from before she ever set foot in Millbrook. She recounted private business associates Jeremiah had never mentioned to her. She knew the contents of letters he had sent to investors. She even described, word for word, conversations held in that very library years earlier. "The mirror woman sees everything that happens here," Elena explained. "She's been watching for years, listening, remembering. She knows the secret business arrangements, the hidden financial records, the real reason Jeremiah chose this house." Piece by piece, a pattern emerged. Elena's revelations suggested that Hartwell had chosen the mansion for its hidden passages, and built his fortune by eavesdropping, using stolen secrets to blackmail competitors and sway business deals. In his marriages, they provided the appearance of domestic respectability, while hiding something far more sinister. Jeremiah, sensing the tide turning, summoned Dr. Henley to testify to Elena's condition. But with Don Carlos present, the tone shifted from medical evaluation to criminal interrogation. "Doctor," Don Carlos asked, "how can two women with no prior history of mental illness develop the same symptoms after living in the same room?" Henley hesitated. "It is unusual, though not impossible. Environmental factors, stress, isolation, or exposure to certain substances could produce similar effects. The specific fixation on mirrors could be a shared delusion." "Or what, doctor?" Henley's voice lowered. "Or both women were exposed to the same environmental condition, capable of producing hallucinatory effects, leaving them functional in daily life, but highly susceptible and vulnerable to implanted memories." The implication was devastating. If true, then Margaret's madness and Elena's delusions weren't accidents, they were engineered. Elena, growing desperate, pleaded again for a mirror. When denied, she began rattling off the contents of locked rooms and describing hidden compartments Jeremiah claimed she couldn't possibly know existed. Then she stopped mid-sentence. "The mirror woman says she can prove everything," Elena announced. She led them to the master bedroom, instructing them to move the massive wardrobe. Behind it, the narrow panel Maria had found earlier swung open, revealing the secret passage. But this time, there was more. A hidden compartment. Inside, bundles of papers. By lamplight, Don Carlos unfolded the documents. What he read was worse than anything Elena had suggested. A leather-bound ledger detailed decades of surveillance notes on private conversations, political dealings, and personal scandals. Each entry, written in Jeremiah's own hand, showed how he had used the mansion's hidden vantage points to collect secrets and weaponize them. March 15, 1829, Senator Patterson discussed railroad route plans in drawing room. Confirmed. Northern Passage through Millbrook Valley. Adjusted investment portfolio accordingly. June 3, 1829, Judge Dunlap revealed gambling debts to his wife in their bedroom. Excellent leverage for upcoming court cases involving the ironworks. The walls of the Hartwell mansion had ears, and Jeremiah Hartwell had been listening all along. But the surveillance ledger was only the beginning. Beneath loose floorboards, wrapped in oilcloth, lay a second cache of papers correspondence between Jeremiah Hartwell and Dr. Heinrich Zimmermann, a German physician notorious for his so-called experimental treatments for female hysteria in private institutions across Pennsylvania. The letters, a mix of English and German, outlined a calculated program designed to induce controlled mental instability in women who threatened their husbands' interests. The treatments involved carefully measured doses of mercury compounds, laudanum derivatives, and plant extracts that triggered hallucinations and disorientation without impairing the victim's ability to function in public. "The beauty of the treatment," Zimmermann wrote, "is that the subject retains enough rationality to appear normal in casual interactions, yet develops specific obsessions and delusions that discredit any inconvenient truths she might speak. A fixation on mirrors is particularly effective, as it mimics feminine vanity while concealing pathological intent." Elena's accusations of being drugged were no delusion. They were a precise description of a systematic poisoning regimen. The headache medicine Jeremiah administered contained the exact compounds Zimmermann described, designed to warp perception, intensify paranoia, and twist reflections into visions of things no one else could see. Margaret Hartwell hadn't suffered a tragic collapse. She had been silenced. When she stumbled upon evidence of Jeremiah's surveillance operation, She was dosed until her mind fractured, her warnings dismissed as the fantasies of a hysterical wife. And the scope was far greater than anyone had imagined. Jeremiah's hidden passages weren't just for spying on guests. The documents revealed a private intelligence network, an elaborate system of concealed listening points, document copying equipment, and storage for blackmail material. His marriages weren't unions of love. They were calculated arrangements. Each wife served as a respectable hostess, inviting influential men into the mansion where their secrets would be harvested. When Margaret became a liability, she was destroyed under the guise of illness. When Elena followed the same path, Jeremiah confidently repeated the process, knowing that the ignorance of the medical community would protect him. Don Carlos's reaction was immediate. He turned to Jeremiah with icy precision. "Elena will leave this house tonight with these documents as evidence for the authorities. Dr. Henley, I trust you will revise your diagnosis in light of this." Henley's voice was grim. "If these papers are genuine, both Mrs. Margaret Hartwell and Mrs. Elena Hartwell were victims of deliberate poisoning designed to mimic mental illness. Elena's condition should improve once the toxins are removed." Jeremiah remained eerily calm. "The documents are forgeries," he said smoothly, "planted by Elena in the depths of her illness to support her fantasies. But Don Carlos had anticipated this. Then you will not object to independent chemical analysis of the medicines you've given her, nor to handwriting experts verifying the documents." Before Hartwell could answer, another voice spoke from the doorway. Sarah Quinn, the head housekeeper for over a decade, stepped forward, her face tight with resolve. "I can't stay silent any longer. I've seen 2 good women destroyed in this house. Mr. Rodriguez, your daughter is telling the truth." Her testimony was the final blow. She had seen Jeremiah mixing the medicines, using the passages to spy, and timing the doses to coincide with long hours in the master bedroom. "I prepared those doses myself," Sarah admitted, her voice trembling. "He said they were remedies from Dr. Henley, but they came in unmarked bottles, shipped privately. When I asked, he said they were experimental treatments from Europe. I watched Mrs. Margaret become obsessed with mirrors, claiming she was watched through the walls. Everyone called her hysterical. And when Mrs. Elena described the same thing, I knew." Sarah detailed the pattern: increasing dosages, gradual isolation, creeping hallucinations, and the inevitable public dismissal of the wife's words as madness. For Dr. Henley, the realization was devastating. His own prescriptions for headaches and nervous strain had been replaced by Jeremiah's poisons. His medical authority twisted into a shield for calculated abuse. "I must examine Mrs. Elena immediately," Henley said, his professional composure breaking. "If she has been subjected to chronic dosing with hallucinogenic compounds, there may be physical evidence to prove it. More importantly, we must begin counteracting whatever substances remain in her system." Dr. Henley insisted, but even with the evidence piling high against him, Jeremiah Hartwell's mind remained sharp, calculating, strategic. Instead of doubling down on denial, he pivoted to what sounded like a partial confession, carefully crafted to limit his own legal exposure. "You're correct," he said evenly. "I have conducted surveillance from this house. The hidden passages were already here when I purchased the property, the work of the previous owner, who used them for business intelligence. I merely continued the practice. It gave me an advantage in negotiations." He acknowledged the spying, but dismissed the poisoning as fiction. His wives, he claimed, had stumbled on the passages themselves, and the shock of discovering his business methods had driven them to breakdowns. The medicines, he said, were legitimate treatments that had simply failed to cure their conditions. Margaret believed I was spying on her personally. Her health collapsed under that belief. Elena is following the same tragic path, inventing conspiracies to explain ordinary business activities. Under other circumstances, it might have worked. But the letters from Dr. Heinrich Zimmermann were too precise, too damning, and their connection to both women's symptoms was undeniable. Don Carlos wasn't about to let Jeremiah wriggle free. We'll let the courts decide whether you've been running a business or a criminal conspiracy. In the meantime, my daughter leaves this house tonight, and she takes these documents with her. Then, unexpectedly, Elena spoke. Her voice was .com/lucid. The mirror woman isn't gone. She's still here, still warning people about this house. But I see her clearly now, without the medicines clouding me. She isn't a spirit. She's me. The part of me that stayed clear while the rest was being destroyed. It was a breakthrough. The mirror woman had been her own subconscious, Minda hidden, rational self fighting to remember and preserve the truth. Those conversations in the glass had been Elena's way of talking to herself, passing along information she'd gathered but couldn't access under the drug's influence. I remember everything now, Elena continued. Every conversation I overheard through the passages. Every document I glimpsed. Every letter to Dr. Zimmerman. The mirror woman wasn't giving me new information. She was helping me recall my own memories. The aftermath was explosive. Don Carlos moved quickly, delivering the evidence to county authorities. Dr. Henley began formally documenting Elena's recovery, proof that her illness had been chemically induced. Within days of halting Jeremiah's medicines, her symptoms vanished. The mere fixation faded, her clarity returned, and her detailed recollections painted a complete picture of the Hartwell operation. The investigation widened. From the mansion's hidden compartments came years of record surveillance notes, blackmail files, and transaction ledgers. Jeremiah's clients were exposed, corrupt judges, politicians, and businessmen who had paid handsomely for secrets on their rivals. Margaret Hartwell's tragedy was rewritten. Her body was exhumed, and forensic tests primitive by today's standards, but advanced for 1835 detected mercury and other toxins. Her death was reclassified as homicide. The asylum that had confined her turned over records, revealing that she'd had lucid periods, during which she repeatedly accused Jeremiah of poisoning women to silence them. What had once been dismissed as delusion was now recognized as eyewitness testimony from a victim. Sarah Quinn's decision to speak sealed the case. She confirmed the timing of the doses, the growing isolation of the wives, and their steady descent into mirror-obsessed paranoia. She even identified other possible victims' guests and business contacts who had left the mansion reporting strange symptoms. Dr. Zimmerman was tracked down in Philadelphia, still experimenting on patients. His arrest cracked open a wider network of physicians and businessmen who used medical treatments as weapons against women who became inconvenient. The newspapers called it the poisoning conspiracy, and the scandal swept across Pennsylvania and beyond. Jeremiah Hartwell's trial became one of the most sensational in state history. The prosecution brought Elena's clear-headed testimony, Sarah's damning account, and the treasure trove of documents from the hidden passages. Most devastating of all was Dr. Zimmerman's cooperation, trading a lighter sentence for a full confession and expert testimony on exactly how the poisons worked. The defense painted Jeremiah as a man manipulated by others, misled into believing his wives were genuinely ill. But the evidence told another story, one of deliberate, systematic destruction, orchestrated by the man at the center of the grand mansion on Beacon Hill. The defense's last tactic collapsed when prosecutors produced ironclad evidence. Jeremiah himself had initiated contact with Dr. Heinrich Zimmerman, specifically requesting treatments designed to mimic insanity while leaving the victims physically capable of functioning. The jury didn't hesitate. Guilty on all counts: murder in the first degree for Margaret's death, attempted murder for Elena's poisoning, and multiple charges of conspiracy, fraud, and extortion tied to his surveillance empire. The judge's sentence reflected the sheer magnitude of the crimes: death by hanging, to be carried out within 30 days. By the time the gallows were prepared in December 1835, Elena was fully recovered. She had returned to her father's home in Pittsburgh, gradually stepping back into society. In time, she remarried a Spanish goods merchant and lived a long, peaceful life. Beyond her testimony in court, she never again spoke publicly about her time in the Hartwell mansion. The mansion itself became a physical symbol of the darkest corners of America's industrial age and of the ease with which women's fears could be dismissed as hysteria. It was sold off to cover Jeremiah's debts and later converted into a boarding house for railroad workers. The hidden passages were sealed, the mirrors removed. The once infamous master bedroom was split into smaller units, erasing its sinister legacy brick by brick. Yet, the shadow of the Hartwell conspiracy stretched far beyond the death of its architect. The case triggered sweeping legal reforms in Pennsylvania requiring independent medical evaluations before committing patients, and tighter oversight on private asylums. It sparked a public reckoning over the weaponization of medicine and the urgent need to safeguard women's rights in healthcare. Dr. Henley, crushed by the knowledge of how he had been manipulated, dedicated the rest of his career to researching toxic compounds and their effects on mental health. Funded in part by compensation from Jeremiah's estate, his work helped advance techniques for detecting poisoning and treating its consequences. He became a vocal advocate for women's medical rights, insisting that female patients be treated with the same seriousness and dignity as male patients. The truth about Margaret and Elena's suffering raised unsettling questions. How many other women across America had been silenced in similar ways, declared insane, when in fact they had been victims of deliberate abuse? Historical records hint that the Hartwell case was not an anomaly, but part of a broader, hidden epidemic of medical cruelty. It was also a searing reminder of why women's voices must be believed even when their accounts seem improbable. Both Margaret and Elena had insisted they were being watched, drugged, and manipulated. Both had been dismissed as unstable, and both had been telling the truth. Today, the original site of the Hartwell mansion is a quiet park in the Pittsburgh metropolitan area, a historical marker installed in 1985, exactly 150 years after Jeremiah's execution, bears a simple inscription: in memory of Margaret Dunlap Hartwell, Elena Rodriguez Hartwell, and all victims of medical abuse. Their courage in seeking truth, despite overwhelming obstacles, helped establish legal protections that continue to safeguard patients' rights today. The case stands as a chilling warning. The vulnerable can be preyed upon by those in power, and the first step to justice is to listen. So, what do you think? Was the full truth uncovered? Or are there other victims whose names we will never know? If this story gripped you, subscribe, hit the bell icon, and share it with someone who loves dark mysteries.